Perspectives, Finding Common Ground, a podcast series that brings together a panel of thought leader perspectives as a forum to socialize and problem solve education technology issues with the goal to ultimately find common ground.
Hi, my name is Patrick Devaney, and I'm pleased to welcome you to this episode of Perspectives, Finding Common Ground. Today, we're going to be talking about measuring Edtech ROI. And it's a bit of a paradox because ROI is typically a financial term, and we are measuring it here in terms of the return on investments in education technology products. So I'm looking forward to a fascinating conversation, and no further ado, I'd like to start by bringing our guests up to introduce themselves. First, I think we're going to start with you, Erica.
Thanks so much, Pat. Happy to be here with all of you today. My name is Erica Hartman, and I am an education strategist at GoGuardian and also a former chief technology officer in New Jersey. Also a proud mom to children who use Edtech software all the time. So I kind of come from all sides. Super happy to be here. GoGuardian, as everyone knows, we have 8 products now, from filtering to classroom management, as well as assessment and curriculum. So super happy to be talking about this return on investment topic. And, for me, return on investment really means when implementation meets needs of schools. And that's kind of like the spot where everything comes together. And really just thinking about it, not only from just usage and analytics, but also from the human perspective as well, and involving the stakeholders that use the products every day, whether it's teachers or students, guardians, administrators. How do they really feel about the product, and what feedback can they give on as well? I think taking that holistic approach is important.
Fantastic. Welcome, Eric. So glad to have you here today. Next, I think we'll go to you, Kyle.
All right. Thanks, Patrick. So I'm Kyle Berger. I'm the Chief Technology Officer in Grapevine Colleyville ISD, located in the North Texas area. I've been a CTO for about 22 years in tech space here in K-12. And, ROI for all those years, ROI used to be something that was a clear-cut thing, like you said, Patrick. It was all dollars and cents. But it's very different. And it's very different for each of us. For each of us on this call, it's very different on how we look at ROI based on the specific goals of our schools or districts. As Erica mentioned, the functionality, the implementation effectiveness. But ultimately for us in education too, it's the switch on ROI from that investment to the return on the instruction. Because that's what we're really looking for, is what is the instructional impact of the implementation of these software. Now, some might say not all softwares have that direct impact, but in a sense they do. If we can't tie that Edtech software back to instructional impact in the classroom, then we have a bigger issue altogether. So for me, ROI takes many different lenses. It can have a financial lens, but the biggest is the impact in our classroom on the return on instruction.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kyle. And third, but certainly not least, Sal. How are you?
Hello there. Sal D'Angelo, currently a superintendent in upstate New York, former chief technology officer. And one way or another, I've spent probably close to 40 years with with instructional technology from its infancy. And I'm loving the conversation already along the lines of what Erica and Kyle had said. For me, it's less about the financial aspect of a return on investment, but how are we reducing the stress, improving the efficiency? And in this day and age where our teachers are burned out and our systems are stressed, how can we find products that actually make our lives easier and more efficient? And I can't say it any more eloquently than Kyle did. And get to the bottom of why our core, what our core mission is. And that's all about instruction and what happens in our classrooms day to day.
Fantastic. Well, this is going to be a fun conversation. And I think I'd like to start with some real world examples. So I guess I would ask each of you, if you could, to share an example that have had a particularly positive impact. And to do that from your perspective. So anybody who wants to start, please feel free to jump in with an example of a successful implementation, one that you think has brought high return on or ROI.
I can take a crack at that if you'd like.
Sure.
One thing that comes to mind, I think is common to all of us in K-12 education, are student information systems. And we deal with information systems on a daily basis. And I find in my career that when something isn't necessarily working for us, the first thing we want to do is throw the baby out with the bathwater. And for any of us in this virtual room who've been responsible for information systems, we understand what's at what's at risk in arbitrarily making a decision like that. So even though some of our end users are often frustrated with a particular feature or function, we think of it more globally in terms of how is this, work, the interoperability with all our other systems. And at the end of the day, are we really evaluating it in terms of its effectiveness? And so I was in my previous district when I was CTO, the student information system wasn't necessarily serving our best interests. It wasn't informing, helping us improve instruction. We weren't being able to extract the data that we thought was possible from the systems, and we had kind of outgrown that particular product. And so we took the task of evaluating our next possible system very seriously. And we went through a very well articulated, very structured process to see who the players in the space were. We set up some decision criteria and some matrix around what we were looking for, what were the problems we were trying to solve. And then we took a step back, because I think the first thing that's important to know is, do we actually, and can we confirm that the system we're currently using can't do what we want it to do? I think all too often we blame the system and not the operators. And so one of the things that I've learned through my career, slow down a little bit, is it that the system cannot do this, or have we not received either the adequate professional development or the expertise to make it do what we want? And we all know, if we've been in this industry a while, so some systems are easier to use than others. Some systems have the flexibility, adaptability that we can achieve that goal, and others cannot. So in this particular example, we truly came to the conclusion that the system that we were currently using, it was also close to end of life. The manufacturer had told us that they're probably not going to support this product for very many more years. So we had a couple things that were kind of creating the urgency around finding a system that was more suitable. And I'll try to give you the Reader's Digest version. So we went out and, importantly, talked to all the different stakeholders, right? Sometimes if we sit in our IT offices, we're really well connected to our technicians and our information scientists, but we're not as well connected to our end users as we really need. Really, at the end of the day, they're the ones that we want to ensure are successful with the new implementation. They're the boots on the ground. They're in the field. They're the ones that are going to actually operationalize this and give us that a return on investment, whether we think that's financial, instructional, or just in productivity and efficiency. And so we truly went out and understood and asked them, what problems did we need to solve for them, and what were their pain points? And then we carefully mapped that against demonstrations on multiple occasions with the vendors. We could give them real scenarios about what our problems were, how they thought they could solve them. And we use, there's a lot of change management science out there and theory out there. And, I'm always careful about trying to apply theory to actual real world examples. But we've all been probably in situations where we've implemented something new. And if we don't implement that with fidelity, it will fail regardless of how good the product is and how good our people are. So understanding that change process, understanding that people are going to mourn the system you're coming from and going to, they're going to be attached to it. You really have to make sure they understand that they're going to be given the proper support and the encouragement to have time to transition to the new system. And so once the decision was made, we had a lot of professional development and questions and answers for all stakeholders, everything from, remember who our stakeholders in K-12 education are. There are our teachers, there are non-instructional staff, there are parents, there are community, there are administrators, there's the board. So we've got a lot of stakeholders to take into consideration. And so we took those groups into consideration. We understood right from the start, we were going to create a culture of, we're going to fail at some of this, and that's okay, but we're just going to pick up where we are, figure out how we can fix it, and we'll move on. Because we wanted to assure people that we understood this isn't going to go smoothly in all facets. We're going to really engineer for those complexities. And through the course of a very methodical implementation, about a year, we spun the new system up. We did it in phases, the most mission critical items first, and then some of the additional features. We did a lot of professional development. We had end users, give us feedback. We were able to make corrections because the system had a lot of flexibilities, and we had the in-house talent to address some of those. We were able to kind of get to the place we wanted to go. And it was a work in progress. It took us several years because everyone's always attached to that particular form or that particular layout. but they could never answer, was there a business case for that? Or did they just like where the logo was? And so we had to get past some of that. And, once you follow change theory and you have the guiding coalition, they helped you evaluate the system. You've now implemented, you go back, and then you start to do what they call institutionalize it, make it kind of memorialize it, make it so that this is what everyone is bought into and using. Because, and I'll stop there, but buy-in is a large part of this conversation too. Do people believe that in the end, you're going to be able to deliver on your promise that this is going to be better? It is going to be something that's going to make me feel more satisfied with my work, and it's going to have the outcome of improving instruction and our lives in the classroom. So that was an example that we had.
Great.
Sal, I always said I'll only do a new student information system once in my life.
Oh, yes. I would agree with all of y'all. Yes.
You got it.
It's probably one of the hardest things to do because it's the brains of the school system,
Mhm.
right? And it's a really big decision. And I love the methodical approach that you took to it, including all the stakeholders. I do want to throw out, just kind of putting on my old CTO hat too, is that we were going out for several different platforms, a new student information system, an adaptive assessment, classroom management, a bunch of tools all at once. And I thought, you know what, instead of having all these siloed conversations with all these different vendors, I had this idea. I think I got it from like ISTE or something, where we would have our own vendor summit at our district. So we actually invited all of the vendors that we were talking to come to our school, sit in one of our buildings, and then we presented our strategic goals to all of the vendors. And we said, okay, this is what we're looking for. Before we even send you the RFP, before you even send us a quote or call us, can you do these things? And it was really eye-opening because number one, who showed up, who came to the table? Number two, who was like, yes, we can do this. Yes, we are going to be a partner in education with you. I think that's so important when you're looking for a vendor, is someone who's definitely going to partner with you. And then a third was like, there were some vendors that came, they're like, wow, we cannot do this right now, but thank you for telling us that this is what you're looking for, because this will help us, inform our product in the future. So I'm a big believer in really, before you start even going into the procurement process, trying to get the vendors to the table and show them, all right, these are the goals. Because like Kyle, you said, every school has different goals. Every school is different. And bringing them to the table, having them come onto your turf and territory and seeing the makeup of your school, the culture and what's going on, I think it's really eye-opening to the vendors. And I think it just kind of helps streamline that procurement process as well.
Absolutely. I would definitely agree with all of y'all, and several things that Sal, you talked about is a factor that a lot of people don't consider, and that is the cost of change in general. Not talking about the financial cost of change. Sometimes it's the emotional cost of change. The fear of change is something that we have to deal with daily in the world of technology. And it's something that we're always comfortable with, but our end users typically are not. So that's something that we have to focus on a lot for us. When we look at, or I think through my career of Edtech implementations and the best ROI, I've had very fortunate experience, probably like many of y'all, over my career in several different districts. I have one that can measure the impact all over the place, to be honest. And it is our single sign-on solution and provider with ClassLink. And the reason that came for us is because simply this solution ROI hit all of those general areas that people talk about, the financial and instructional, all these different things. So, solving the simple need of having a plethora, we have these toolboxes of EdTech tools out there for our teachers, right? It's a toolbox that's just piled full of all sorts of stuff, and they just randomly pull out what they want to try to use. No way to know what's working great. And then how long it takes them to sort through that toolbox to actually get to the right tool. Oh my gosh, thinking back to the old days, I guess, when we had all these thousands of logons, all these different pages to go to, all these different things, and just sitting back and watching in the classroom how much instructional time was lost just trying to get to the work. And then the frustration that built inside of there. And so we saw the gains in instructional impact right away because we can get to the tools quicker. And then we see the cost saving because the time, the management of all that was happening back on the side of our technology folks in general. Then we saw the other aspect of it, our teacher, seeing the simplicity and the gains that happened on that side. So really it was one that has this ROI that touches every which area. And that's one of those things that we really strive for in any product, is really opening that lens of ROI to see what all areas, because a lot of times we don't consider areas that we will see an impact on the ROI. I think Sal mentioned a little bit about it too, and it could be around just the training and that, the training aspect of it. Company will sell you something with an ROI, but they're not calculating in the cost of training, the cost of change that we have to figure out. And those kind of elements are so important. So for us, it was a solution that kind of broad umbrellaed all of our solutions together and now provides us even with a better lens to measure that return on instruction for all of our different applications. So that's kind of where we've sat. And I'll tell you, that's been a joy. Every district I've moved to, one of the first things, and the first thing is I ever tell a new CTO is get your hands around that because you can be a hero across all departments in your district and then move forward from there.
Wow, this is going to be a good conversation. It already is. One of the things that struck my ear as I listened to all three of you respond to that question was the word inertia. There's inertia beforehand. Do we have to change? What do we expect? There's the word inertia when you start to change. You're resisting what people have been doing. And then there's the word inertia comes out again when you start having success and things start to somersault in the positive way. So clearly it's about momentum and inertia and shifting that inertia. Everybody talked about a whole lot of different things that would indicate success. Are there a small handful, 2 or 3 things that you think are the right things to measure in this process? And they might be different up front than they are later on, but I'm always a fan of finding things that we can measure and then use those to demonstrate the success. Otherwise, it tends to be too soft. We have to have some tangible things to work on. Kyle, you want to start with that?
Absolutely. One of the base ones that's probably common for all of us is the ability to see any kind of improvement in student outcomes. And talking those particularly about instructional EdTech products. Can we see any type of measurable improvement in that student outcome? From there, the other ones for us are, of course, the increase in teacher productivity and satisfaction around it. And of course, going back to that fear of change, teachers are juggling so much to have another tool come in. Let's make sure we're not throwing something else at them. Like Sal mentioned too, let's make sure that current things we have, we're using to its full potential. I'll admit, and maybe y'all too have been CTOs out there, very rarely do we put a product out there and use 100% of it. Sometimes we get it off the ground, we have all the fun, excitement, and maybe we're actually using 50% of the functionality, 75% of the functionality, and then we just start running. And we never go back to see, oh, it could do that too. And so with that analysis. So for me, it's the, improving those student outcomes, the teacher satisfaction. Can I have improved their productivity on there? There's always the cost factor. I don't think we have to talk about the cost factor, and saving money in there. That's pretty straightforward. But then also take it from a lens of the student perception and how they are interacting with it. That's a big thing that I've done in my career is always have student advisory committees. And our students are actually part of our software adoption process. They actually look at the products from a student lens and provide us feedback on it. They are in the demos. They do those things as well. Because who's our biggest user? Our students. And they're the ones that usually don't get a voice in a lot of what we're doing. So that's a big thing that's important for us to get their perspective in our ROI calculations.
Either Erica or Sal, any thoughts on that?
Well, I think for me, districts are always asking, what's our usage? They just want a spreadsheet with a usage. And I think that's great. I mean, I would want that too as a CTO. But I think there's another story to be told there too. I think you have to combine that usage, whether it's like the daily total engagements or the hours that are spent or how much time it's saving. Even teacher retention could be one of the metrics. Are teachers happy? I've had products where teachers are like, I cannot teach without this. Like if you remove this product, I can't teach without it. And I think that's really a big deal right now. Thinking about just like the EdTech whiplash that we sometimes inadvertently subject our teachers and our parents and our students to. I think like Kyle said, like sometimes something new comes out and you're like, oh, let's get this. It's a great new feature, but you might already have a product that does that. You just don't maybe have the relationship with your customer success manager or the vendor where they're constantly updating you on what's new and new functionality and how you can roll it out too at the district level. So I think, involving all stakeholders, looking at the numbers of usage is really important, but looking at the human component, having student focus groups, I think is amazing. We have had students who had brought platforms to us and are like, well, how come we can't use this? And, that's a great conversation because sometimes there's platforms that we as schools just can allow for certain reasons. And once you explain it to the students, then they understand. But if you just say, no, we can't use it without a reason, that's when they start to get upset, I think. So I think definitely the human element and the numbers implement as together paints like a really great picture. But also marketing the products that you already have to your teachers. I think sometimes we don't do a good job of that. That's when you start to get all these requests like, let's buy this and let's do this. But wait, maybe internally we're not doing a great job of marketing what we have and being really proud of what we've already implemented and showing everybody, okay, let's make a chart for each grade level. This is what you have access to, and this is what you can use. And I think that really helps cut down on those requests from teachers and students. Now, some, of course, may be warranted and we have to look at them, but a lot of those times we already have products that will solve those issues.
Boy, Erica, you're so on point. I can't help but think in one of your comments, you said, a teacher made the comment that they couldn't teach without this. So how can one teacher in one grade level say that and that not be the sentiment of similar teachers, right? So it goes back to that marketing perspective. They probably don't know or haven't seen how effective that particular software can be for them. And that's why I think it's essential in part of that marketing campaign to use our own teachers as our spokespeople, right? Get in there and allow teachers to collaborate and share and create a culture that's open to that, right? I think a lot of times in Edtech, we've seen, mostly before the pandemic, teachers were very reluctant in letting other people know their Edtech competency because they were worried about looking foolish and trying to create a culture. We're talking more about leadership, building leadership, district leadership, where we're not judging you. We want you to be more effective. We encourage you to explore. And to do that, we're going to sub a teacher out for a day and have them visit a few classrooms of other teachers who are interested. No one is a better spokesperson than a colleague who's not evaluating them, not judging them on their knowledge, but willing to share and help them be successful as a partner. The other thing you mentioned that struck me was the metrics around utilization. I've used those in the past for conversations with building leaders who were so adamant they couldn't do without something. And then when you showed them, well, would you guess what percentage of your staff is actually using what you believe is such an essential tool? And it's less than 3%. And then all of a sudden, data helps us have a discussion about what we're doing or not doing. And if that product is something that is a product that would allow us to be more effective, then what are we not doing to help those teachers utilize it? And if we're not, then that's where some of the financial consideration can come into play and say, well, if perhaps we're not using this, could our money better be spent on licensing for something else that people want? But, I was thinking the best thing since sliced bread, but you said tech whiplash. I hadn't heard that term before, but that's true too. What is the tech integration du jour? And we got to be very careful because for teachers who've been around long enough, they're very suspect of us just giving them the next best thing. And I think to some point it creates a barrier for us, even when the product is that good.
Yeah.
That reminded me of a few things, to be honest. I like the tech whiplash experience because I think I experience and feel that every day sometimes, and sitting in a CTO seat. But one thing you mentioned on the marketing aspect of it is something that we all fall victim to. So say we just adopted a new math curriculum last year, and we would have a pouring of PD into that math curriculum or a few years ago, everybody going through the training. Then a couple of years go by, we always tend to somehow forget that we have turnover. And there's people that come in that didn't get that in-depth training and understanding. They just got thrown into it. We never really went back. So a lot of these institutionalized programs that we had and really invested in, we didn't keep doing the investment in the people around the usage of the product. And now I think something that's key that you need to look at before you abandon, product abandonment is really making sure everybody truly understands how to use it overall before you just jump ship and move away. I think that's something, you really have to think about. And a lot of people just misinterpret that and just want to switch to the new thing. And then the other part of that too, and it all comes down to the data element of it, is we have to realize that constantly switching reading platforms or whatever platforms, we're losing our longitudinal data ability out of these programs to truly possibly measure success, because every product, I think we all know as educators, every product's not going to come in and have an impact within that first 6 weeks. Oh my gosh, the scores are outrageous. It's going to take a little bit of time. And so we'll lose that historical data trends a lot of time. and reset to something new. And then in a couple of years, we reset to something new, and we're just continuing this deadly cycle. And that's something we have to always consider in ROI, I believe, as well.
Yeah, I
You know,
believe it takes about 3 years to
Yeah,
effectively measure because the first year is always implementation. The second, you're kind of training everyone, getting everyone. Then the third year, you're really into it. But I think when you try to explain that to someone else, they're like, well, we want to know the ROI of the first year. Well, it's not going to be true, right? I think
yeah,
it's hard to wrap your head around for many people, especially like board members or even business administrators. It's going to take 3 years to really figure out if this is working or not. I think sometimes you have to go slow to go fast.
absolutely.
Kyle, thank you for that. It's while you were talking, I was thinking about our new teacher orientation, where we bring our new teachers in for 2 days and we try to stuff their basket as full as possible. And no human can, without superhuman capacity, can learn how to use all those systems in one day. And I acknowledge that some may be coming from other districts where they have some similar products or even the exact products, so they're okay. But often we've got brand new teachers coming out of pre-service programs where they quite honestly haven't received all of the tech integration training that they really need to be successful. And here we set them on the first day, and we don't necessarily do a diligent enough job over the course of their first months or years and getting them up to speed. And it's kind of a disservice. So thank you for reminding us about that.
well, you guys have clearly identified that there's a difference between the initial cost and the ongoing cost. There's a difference between the initial return and the ongoing return. And all of those can be measured in some capacity with data. Yet, when we're going through the process of deciding what tools we're going to use, and companies are trying to pitch these tools to school districts with value, data comes into play. And it reminds me an awful lot of politics and elections, and the politicians say they're going to do all these wonderful things, but the reality is how much are they actually impacting them and how much of what they say turns into what they do. So I'd like you to reflect a little bit on your perspective on data when it comes to evaluating new products. Now, the data could be if you use it this much, you're going to get these returns. Data could be it's going to cost you this, but you're going to get this kind of cost savings. There could be lots of different measures of the data, but how important is data in that decision-making process prior to implementation? Because you don't have a perfect knowledge prior to implementation. How important is it? What are some of the pitfalls? What are some of the benefits of having that data available?
I think it starts with
There you go.
having a procurement rubric. I think it
Okay.
starts with, making a standard and having that standard for every product. Now, of course, there's always going to be wiggle room if it's an instructional tool or, a tech tool or a business administrator tool. But I think just to have a standard in place when you're going into evaluation of products, anything from the longevity of the vendor to who owns your data, and the efficacy of the product. I think what's really amazing is that we are now in the age of evidence for EdTech. Finally, I've been waiting for this time of just stopping buying things just because they're new to actually seeing if they are affecting student outcomes or making teachers' lives easier. So I think a lot of it has to do now with the age of evidence is efficacy reports and case studies, and also being able to pick up the phone and call someone who like Kyle or Sal and say, hey, are you using this product in your district? How's it working for you? And getting feedback. I think it's really important that you always pick up the phone, number one. And number two, ask for case studies. Is there an efficacy report showing that this product is improving student outcomes? And just having that procurement rubric ready and having everyone know about it. So before they even bring it to Kyle or they bring it to Sal, they've already went through those process steps themselves. And now it's ready to be evaluated, I think, at the top level.
Anybody else?
I think, overall, data is it's the secret sauce, I guess you could say, behind all of this stuff, and the thing that is every company, every EdTech vendor has their own recipe for the secret sauce. And it's really to understand what is their recipe. And I think all of us know that you can interpret or possibly manipulate data in several different ways, and being sure that you truly understand the data that you're looking at is so important in that aspect. When we talk about usage, is it just they click the button to get in the program? Okay, that's awesome. What did they really do? Were they in there this long? How active inside of the session? Those kind of things. Because we all know kids multitask, they click, they're over here doing something else. when you have those products that come to you sometimes, I don't know if y'all have experienced this, but they say, okay, here's an ROI we can show you, but they have to spend on average 20 minutes a day in this program or you're not going to get that. Oh, gosh, the old drill and kill, I feel, software. And that is tend to die out, but they would be all these caveats like we've seen these metrics of success with 20 minutes daily and this increments and those kind of things. And that's not real world, So it's really analyzing a lot of what sometimes the cherry pick data that vendors, of course, will bring to you. That's their job to sell a product. But I really like it when a vendor can come to me with data that's similar to districts of my type, my size, my demographics, those kind of things. It's great to see that, let's say, LA Unified did this or somebody that I'm not them. I'm excited they saw that, but what does it look like in a district like mine is what's more important to me. And so that's something we talk a lot about to vendors when they come in with their canned slideshows. That's awesome. But let's talk about somebody like us.
I guess the only couple of things I would add, and agree wholeheartedly with what's been stated is, we, something that Erica said earlier is still resonating with me, and that's that, the interoperability piece too. I think, it's so key. One of the decision matrix, regardless of what the data talks about on any given program, is how well will that work and interact with the other programs. Just can't get past that because I think you mentioned, silo activities. And for so long, we've had these systems that aren't talking to each other, and that interoperability is just so key. Just can't help to get past that. So.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, Sal, and I'm glad you brought that back in because it is key. We have to break down those silos, be able to exchange this data, to compare back and forth across all sorts of metrics, and that's very important when we look at any product. Is can they do that, and what kind of interoperability?
The other dimension, one thing you said, Kyle, was not only districts your size, but also I think vendors and shout out to ClassLink, they do this well, who have former practitioners having these conversations, right? You've got salespeople and you have people who have had boots on the ground. One of the things that I found, I've had, to your point, a product come in, you use this 5 days a week for 45 minutes, you're going to get this result. Have you ever been in elementary school? Have you ever did an elementary schedule? Is that, that's great if I don't want to do any ELA or social studies that week. So I think having people who can relate to the real world, as you put it, is key too.
It's clear that the data can be valuable. Has anybody seen an example of where I've heard, I want to see examples more like me? Any particular example come to mind of where the data can be presented and the disconnect between the data in that example and your situation causes a real divergence in terms of what it really means? Just a quick, is there something easy that comes top of mind?
Honestly, can't think of one right away because we make it pretty clear nowadays when folks are coming in to us is, don't, I hate to say it, don't bring your canned presentation.
Yeah.
Make sure you understand Grapevine Colleyville ISD when you're coming to talk about your product. Because if not, then it's not going to, mean much to us because there's been some that might come from a extreme different demographics, economics, and all those kind of situation, or even, okay, I'm in Texas. We don't do Common Core, all this other kind of stuff. That used to be the thing too, that, our standards are totally different. So you can't really compare us to these other folks out there when you're bringing us these case studies. So that has changed. For me, I feel that has changed a lot over the past couple of years.
Okay.
I think I have an example. I see a lot of maybe corporate infiltrating Edtech,
Yes.
maybe in terms of ticketing or asset management, trying to come in and see that they might have an opportunity in this space, which I think is really interesting. But when it gets down to it, they're not purpose-built for K-12 education, and they don't know our pain points. And I'm always wondering, well, your product is great, but you're not speaking to me the way that I think you should be speaking to me, and you're not really addressing my pain points. So I think that's something really interesting that some of these other products are trying to come into the K-12 market. And I think for them, they're learning. Hey, Edtech is hard to learn, right? We have so many different customizations, and our end users are adults all the way down to tiny humans, right? So they're not used to those end users. And I think what's interesting to me is just that coming into this market and saying, you know what, this is a really hard market because the end user could be literally anyone, right? And I think that's really different. But you can always, I'm sure you can always spot them as soon as they got you on the phone. You're like, well, hey, can you help support our K-5 bilingual? And they're like, what? No, so I think it's interesting, but it's probably a learning curve for them as well. But that's why I think it's so important for especially vendors to be purpose built for K-12, because they know our pain points. They know what you all are dealing with on a daily basis. But it's interesting to see, to kind of watch this infiltration.
One thing that's interesting to me is, a vendor who can come in, and this won't be applicable to all vendors because of the type of product they have. But when they've done the due diligence to pull some publicly available data and project their product using my data, it kind of gives me a better sense for two things. One, that I can then visualize how this might apply in my context, but more importantly, that they cared enough to put the time and effort into me as a client. One of the things that I am a big proponent of is that, and I think Erica touched on this earlier, if we're going to, maybe excuse the expression of this, I was going to say, jump in bed together as a vendor, right? It's a relationship. It's got to be symbiotic. There's got to be times where I got to show some grace when something didn't go as well as I would have expected. You guys and your team are human, and vice versa. There are times when I've got to deliver something, and I need all hands on deck. And so that give and take, and what I see often, especially depending on when that leverage shifts, a demand for a lot of taking but no giving. And so I think when that balance is inequitable, it's a sign that there's not a really great underlying relationship. Because I don't know if you share this frustration, but we've all chosen a product in a certain context and time frame, and then all of a sudden, another vendor comes along 6 months or a year later, and certainly has done their R&D and leapfrogs it. And then there's this propensity to say, oh, that's kind of I would love to see those features in this product. And then we start to get a little antsy. And rather than, and Eric, I think you mentioned this too, going back to the vendor and saying, this is something that your product doesn't address. What is your project, landscape, your product roadmap look like? Are you getting feedback from the user community? The companies that impress me most, I go back to the example of the student information system, at that point, we were a big Microsoft shop, and this goes back a ways. We weren't a Google shop, but everyone was integrating to Google in K while they weren't integrating this one product to Microsoft. But in having an honest conversation about where that was in their product roadmap helped me understand where that product was going to fit for me. But more importantly, the company that we did choose had a really good structure in place to get end user feedback about product enhancements that would be helpful. And then we have to have the grace to understand you can't do them all. You have a return on investment. You have to figure out how much of the community needs this or wants this, but have that be a part of the decision criteria in terms of how you drive your future products. When I saw and know that when I put a feature enhancement in, it may be specific to my district and it might have some weight, it might not, but knowing that you as a vendor are acknowledging me and hearing my voice and feeling like it's at least taken into consideration, I think it strengthens that relationship. I don't know if that makes any sense, but
yeah, no, it's a great point. It's a great transition, Sal. I think I'd love to hear other thoughts on what can the two sides of this conversation do better together by way of collaboration. What can the educator and the product provider sides, how can they collaborate better to improve the outcomes for both?
Absolutely. I think that's great. And when Sal was talking about it, it made me think, oh, well, gosh, that is another tier of the ROI. It's the power of partnership. Are you just coming in here to sell me a product and then move on? Or are you really in this as a partner for me? And where that comes on, what you're talking about, Patrick, too, is those customer success manager positions that companies have or something similar. Somebody that's going to come back and maybe it's 6 months and really look at the data in the program with me. Make sure we're understanding what it's telling us, and then come back with these checkpoints. Not always coming back to sell me something, but really coming back to make sure that they sold me something that's the right fit. That's the kind of conversations I like to have, not the, hey, you need to up this or your student usage numbers, it's going to cost you more. Come in and help me understand my usage and how we can better sell that product. Because we all know we can buy a math program from thousands of different people. It's all about that relationship and partnership that's going to set you apart now. So I think that's a key element of ROI that a lot of us probably do, but we don't really focus and think about the element of them listening customer voice and reacting. Because a lot of them will listen, it's the reacting.
I think that's so important, Kyle. I think the feedback loop, asking the vendor, what does the feedback look like? The loop there. What is the iteration of that? Because a lot of products say, you know what, submit that feature request, but you don't know where it's going. Who's it going to? Who's reading that, and who's looking at it on the other side? So I think really asking a company, that might be something to add to a procurement rubric, is what is the feedback loop in the feature requests? Because we get feature requests from teachers all the time, and we do take them seriously. And we are so proud. Like, that is the happiest moment at GoGuardian, when we can have a feature request and then we can bring it back to that district and say, hey, this feedback from your teachers was so critical. We're rolling it out to everybody in the nation, right? And that's like one of the happiest days that we can have. So it's really important to ask them, like, what is the feedback loop beyond just submit your feature request? How can I funnel that to my point of contact, to the CSM? And how can we meet quarterly to just see, like, what is the progress on this? Because for some schools, a feature could be that critical that they need to have it, because it might be something in the state, at the state level, where they're requiring it, or it might be something at the county level. And for them, they want to keep the product, and they want to be able to keep the product and have the proof that they have this certain feature. So I think definitely asking that is a great question to ask a vendor who is a partner.
If it adds a little bit of clarity to this particular tool they created, it's almost like a kind of a service, but you could actually have visualization into the tool. So you could see not only your request, but the other requests. And then there was some feedback in terms of where it might fall in the product roadmap, whether it was under consideration or kind of not at this time. And so it was giving the customer some feedback as to where it kind of fell, which was pretty good.
There has to be a trust between the sides, both sides in this conversation. And there's an investment in the success of both sides of the conversation, because while it might feel good to a school to get something for a lower price, if that lower price isn't allowing that company to survive, then it's not going to give them a long-term success. So it really strikes me. This conversation brings out that shared benefit, that shared commitment, and the requirement to really trust in that relationship.
Going back to your earlier question, I think user community is important. Pre-pandemic, before we all got comfortable with virtual communities, some of the bigger products that I had used, when I have an opportunity to go to a user conference, and not only there are two sides to that in my mind. One is the vendor being able to present new features and do some professional development, but the other was the exchanging and the informal conversations that took place again among similar users, right? I know many of us were just at a very large New York State-based conference, and the sessions we go to at any conference are important, but some of those conversations we have with colleagues in terms of pain points, features, products, they're ultimately extremely important as well. So, how you can get similar groups of people, birds of a feather, together. Occasionally, everybody's busy and it doesn't always work. But, on occasion, if we can get multiple users together talking through challenges and solutions, I think we raise, everybody's risen or raises up through that as a success together.
I think, too, like I said, it's about trust. And sometimes the curveball that, I'll throw out to vendors when they're selling us products, I'll say, okay, well, tell me about your worst implementation. Tell me about the last customer that left you and why. If you're comfortable of telling me that, because we all know that every product's not the fit for everybody. There's a reason, it's not all, shiny and good with everything you're doing out there. Let's have a real conversation, because here's our problems and where we experience our problems. Let's understand the problems of a past implementation that didn't work, because guess what? I don't want to repeat it. So hopefully, what did you learn from it? What I can learn from it? Because the other thing, like the user groups, any vendor that doesn't think that educators are talking with each other is disconnected. They're those corporate folks that are coming in trying to sell something that doesn't realize that once I bought it, I didn't call my neighbor and say, guess what? I bought it for $1, kid. Oh, okay. You got it for $1? Those kind of things. So the user group in education is so powerful. We are all trying to accomplish the same thing by educating our kids in the future. So we will work together to do that. So companies know that, because they know the word of mouth and their reputation is what matters most. And that's why, like Erica mentioned, a lot of those that try to come into EdTech, they misinterpret and they end up feeling the burn and getting out quickly. The other aspect they learn, and I don't know about y'all, it is a slow sales cycle in K-12. So I always tell them that too. So don't put me in the pipeline because it's a slow cycle.
Kyle, one of the philosophical beliefs I've always had too is I very seldom have bought the cheapest product, mainly because of this. If I try to squeeze every dime out of my vendor, they aren't going to have the capacity to continue doing the R&D and provide the adequate support for me to be successful. So if and I wouldn't never say that with my chief financial officer in the room, but that cost, evaluating that cost, there's so much involved in it. It's more than just the bottom line. And you know, it doesn't make any sense if we select a product and we beat the vendor up to the extent that they're out of business. We go back to square one with everything we've talked about, training, implementation. It's all goes out the door, right? So we have to understand. Patrick, you said trust. Think about what any great relationship is built on, wherever it exists. It's on trust. And Kyle, you mentioned something. I have an example. It won't be. I'm not going to be specific about it. But early on in my career, we made a mutual mistake. There was a communication problem between a vendor and myself. I assumed something, they assumed something, and I had not previously worked with the vendor. Vendor had a great reputation in New York State. But you know what they did? We looked past that. We said, how can we solve the problem? And they ate part of the margin. And and I went one direction, they went in the other. And you know what? To this day, I value that relationship almost 20 years later, because you're right. We need to judge not people on when they're delivering the shiny new car, but when things don't go well, how do they respond and how do they support us? And how do we do that together?
No, I was going to ask Erica, she's on the other side of the table now. I think one thing that I see a lot of businesses or salespeople want to do is, a lot of times folks in that sales side to build a business case, ROI, to drive that cost down to sell to me too. Sometimes, so they have to calculate the cost of doing business with me. So it's not only sometimes them selling to us, it's us selling to them. Why we want to be a partner with you? Because, we're going to bring this feedback back. We're going to do these kind of things. So we have to understand, just like I said, you can't squeeze them for every nickel and dime. You got to be able to have the give and take in there and understand everybody's on it. And if they're going to give you it for dirt free or whatever, you're going to get what you paid for.
Red flag.
Right. That's right. No, we would look for people like, both of you who are giving constant feedback. We all, are doing this for the students and for the teachers. And I think having that in common. But you're right. I mean, sometimes we are not a good fit for a certain school district. And sometimes we have school districts who really want to buy us because they value our partnership. But we might not be the best fit. But I think honesty is definitely key, because you know what? Everything comes back around in EdTech, right? If you move to another district, you're going to think of us first. So that's, fits in your environment. So I think really being honest and, going back to that whole partner in education, where the bottom line is student outcomes and, the human side of it is dealing with people's children and our teachers who are amazing.
Thank you for bringing out that other perspective, because it really does matter. And there's a lot more people on the vendor side of things that are willing to make sure what we're doing is the right thing and not just good for them. So I think it's really important to highlight that. The last question I want to bring out, kind of a quick round robin, is any thoughts around what you believe is on the near future or on the near term horizon that's going to change the efficacy and the return on investment in EdTech products? Is there anything that's going to make this equation, interrupt this equation in a good or a bad way significantly in the near future? And Erica, if you have an idea, you want to start, or you want to pass?
Why do I think the answer is AI?
Exactly.
I'm just going to say AI, and that will just be my answer. Yeah. Well, I think it might be AI. I mean, I think it's going to be hard to even measure the return on investment in any AI features that platforms are building. I think, the adoption rate is very interesting. Some schools are all in, some schools are opposed, some are in the middle. And how are we going to even measure the ROI of AI? I have no idea. and also, for teachers and students. So I think I'm going to say AI as my answer, but I'm not really sure. Yeah.
Final answer.
Yeah, I would take that as a final answer too. I mean, AI is a new disruption since out there. As we somewhat are getting close to Edtech conference season starting out, I guarantee you, as you're going to walk any floor, every business is going to have some sort of AI something. It's all the buzz, but it's the understanding of that AI and what's really happening and what, the trust that needs to be built inside of this that's still unknown. And there's a lot of, like I said, some people are all in, some are. But I think that's a factor right now that a lot of folks are still trying to figure out where that's going to fall and how much are we going to lean towards artificial intelligence guiding everything or guiding a product to outcomes in a sense. Now, let's not be wrong. This has already been happening before, before ChatGPT and all this stuff, type of technology has been there. But this new revolution kind of inside of it is what I think is going to be the most disruptive change on both sides of the equation.
Can we ask AI what AI
Exactly.
is?
What do you think?
I'm sure we can.
Patrick and I were just at a large New York State conference, and pretty much the entire theme of the conference was AI. And I guess, for probably all of us who've been doing this for quite a while, we've seen a lot of disruption, a lot of new trends come. What surprises me is just speed at which it's hitting us. Is just, to go, just think about the last 6 months and the changes. That's what's got me off kilter. And how do we try to legislate our excitement about the potential while protecting, us against the vulnerabilities that somewhat we don't even know about. And like any good technology or science, we just have to be very cautious and methodical about our adoption. Instead of fearing it, we need to embrace it. However, we need to do so in a very intelligent manner.
Well, great. I certainly am so grateful to all of you for your comments here. Now I'm going to attempt to do something which is summarize this in just a couple of seconds, in just a few minutes, 30 seconds, let's say. And I want all of you to keep me honest. So you let me know if I've missed something. I think when we talk about return on investment, it's a life cycle conversation. It's not just a point in time. And so we have to look at the current situation. We have to look at the inertia and what's happening with the current situation. We have to then manage the change process by putting something else in. If we determine we have to do it, we have to manage that process and manage it closely. The way we do that is by having an effective way of measuring the successes and the failures, the misses and the hits. And that really is going to come from compound measurements. It's not going to come from just a time on task, but rather time on task and willingness to use it, time on task and improvement in student outcomes. So ultimately, we want to look at how this tool is being used and the returns. Those returns really have to be focused primarily on the user community, which is the teachers and the students. We also then have to consider when evaluating these tools, are we evaluating them properly? And both sides need to bring the right measurements to the table for those initial conversations. They have to be respectful of the other side in terms of this is how it should be considered by you, and therefore we're going to try to present the conversation in a fashion that works well for that dialogue. I think all of that comes down to it's really a shared success, because when something works, it doesn't just work for the school, it also works for the vendor. And if it's not working for both, the chances of sustainable success go way down. It's very important that there's ongoing feedback loops, that there's a community around the use of this tool, and a community that can share in those successes to foster even further growth. And ultimately, these changes are happening. The return and being able to measure return on investments is happening even faster. And we have to be open to considering those options. And we have to also be cautious when considering how they are impacting us, particularly as a great example is the current trends with AI. Lots of promise. We don't yet know really how they're going to turn out. So we have to continue to be diligent. So that's my 45 seconds on what we talked about for an hour. How close was I? What did I miss?
I don't think we need AI. We just need Patrick.
There we go.
He did.
It's really about collaboration. We have to trust each other. We have to work together, and more communication is better. More is less in terms of the communication, for sure.
Well,
Great. Well, if there's nothing further, I want to thank all of you for your genuine, your unique, and very insightful conversation today. For all of you that are listening, I hope you've enjoyed the discussion, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening. ClassLink is proud to be the meeting place to facilitate these conversations. If you have a topic idea, send it to perspectives@classlink.com. To keep hearing our perspectives, be sure to follow us on Apple and Spotify, and subscribe to us on YouTube.